President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, shared an open debate at the United Nations Security Council to analyze the underlying causes of international insecurity, including the impact of corruption, exclusion, and inequality on conflicts. Chile's Chamber of Deputies approved the motion to impeach President Sebastián Piñera for his involvement in the Pandora Papers scandal. In Niger, 26 children died in a blast on Monday after their straw and wood classrooms caught fire. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, shared an open debate at the United Nations Security Council to analyze the underlying causes of international insecurity, including the impact of corruption, exclusion, and inequality on conflicts. The Mexican head of state visited the UN headquarters in New York for the second time since taking over the presidency. His speech focused on inequality and corruption as the major problems in the world, and also one that leads to violence and migration. The top government officials stated that the promotion of preventive diplomacy and the protection of civilians by keeping the well-being of the people at the heart of all action are the main thrust of his country's presidency. A second open debate, titled Peace and Security Through Preventive Diplomacy, a common objective to all United Nations principal bodies, will be held on November 16th with the participation of the 15 members council and the other bodies of the UN to enable greater efficiency and coordination in preventing conflicts. In the framework of the open debate at the United Nations Security Council, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the world is facing the highest number of violent conflicts since 1945.
Assistance and conflict management tools, the very kind that the United Nations provides around the world, are all under tremendous strain. Peace has never been more urgent. That is why conflict prevention is at the heart of my proposed new agenda for peace. We need to bring the entire UN system and all partners around our common cause of peace. The success of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development depends on solidarity as we support governments' efforts to build development for all and ensure no one is left behind. Ending inequalities and exclusion is a critical part of these and a vital step in giving every person a chance to contribute to their country's future.
The caravan of migrants crossing Mexican territory has come across difficulties on its way. Both the police and the population have shown their refusal to receive them in the state of Oaxaca, fearing presence of COVID among them. 17 days after leaving Tapachula, the migrants have been leaving the caravan, and now there are just over 1,000 people seeking to regularize their migratory situation before continuing on to the United States. Although the National Migration Institute has affirmed that there has been no case of COVID-19 in the caravan, locals' reaction towards this group has turned negative due to the possibility that some may be carrying the disease. And we'll remain on topic. The United States reopened its borders for vaccinated foreign travelers, ending more than 18 months of restrictions on international travel. Pedestrians with proof of vaccination joined the mix of students, essential workers, and returning North Americans entering the U.S. At the San Isidro port of entry, every available booth was staffed with Customs and Border Protection agents who checked for proof of vaccination before waving people through. During the previous 18 months, only a few booths remained open when the pandemic travel ban only allowed U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and people with essential needs into the country. The United Nations International Organization for Migration advocated on Monday in Panama for more controlled routes for the thousands of migrants, mainly Haitians, who are crossing several Latin American countries towards the United States. IOM Deputy Directors Ugochi Daniels and Amy Pope made the request as they are in Panama visiting government shelters for asylum seekers crossing the Darien jungle from Colombia. According to Panama's government data, more than 91,000 migrants have crossed through Darien so far in 2021. Along the way, migrants are exposed to heavy rains, high temperatures, and organized crime.
We have been discussing is more controlled migration on the border with Colombia, similar to what Panama has with Costa Rica, so that the government is better able to support those who arrive. So it's really important to understand that the issue of migrants at the Darien Gap is a complicated one. So there's no one quick solution to it.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Tuesday, Chile's Chamber of Deputies approved the motion to conduct an impeachment trial against President Sebastián Piñera for his involvement in the Pandora Papers scandal. After a 22-hour session and with 78 votes in favor, 67 votes against, and 3 abstentions, the lawmakers approved the impeachment motion, which now goes to the Senate. To proceed, the impeachment motion needs 2/3 vote to unseat the president. Piñera faces his second constitutional impeachment after the charges against him for human rights violations during the social outbreak on late 2019. In this occasion, the accusation is based on the purchase and sale of Dominga Mining Company in the tax haven British Virgin Islands, included in the Pandora Papers scandal.
That it is possible that tomorrow we have a president who will be an example for the rest of the Chileans, and not the situation we are in today, where we have a president who has not only acted outside the administrative probity required in the position he holds, but who has also acted seriously in damaging the image of the nation.
The impunity with which Piñera has governed, the impunity as the author of serious human rights violations since the outbreak of protest, and the impunity which he has been putting his personal interests before the interests of the nation will end, even if only in this chamber.
Now we move on to other topics. Migrants camp overnight into Tuesday at the border between Poland and Belarus as the situation remained calm after attempts to breach the frontier into the European Union the day before. Committee spokesperson Anton Biszowski said there were around 2,000 migrants in the camp. Monday saw a day heavy of tensions on the border, where a large group of migrants, mostly from the Middle East. The European Commission has accused the Belarusian government of tricking migrants and refugees with false promises of easy access to the European Union in what it called a gangster-style approach to a long-running migrant crisis.
Situation at Belarus-Polish borders remains tense. There are around 2,000 refugees, including many women and children, in front of Polish fences. Physical and moral conditions of people are extremely grave and devastated. There is a shortage of water and food. There are no conditions for regular sanitary procedures.
Now we address other topics. In Honduras, climate change is one more factor sparking displacement. With hurricanes and other extreme weather events becoming even more powerful and frequent every year, some 247,000 people in the Central American nation are having to flee their homes. In 2020, the country, along with Guatemala and Nicaragua, were hit by 2 Category 4 storms, Iora and Ira, and saturated many areas with 38 to 63 centimeters of rain. They mark a tragic end to a record-breaking season in the Atlantic with 13 named storms. Across the continent, communities are facing the prospect of dealing with disaster upon disaster, with little time or resources to recover in between. It is clear that climate change has become another factor forcing vulnerable Hondurans and people all across the world to leave their homes. And the death toll from heavy rains lashing Sri Lanka rose to 11, while 7,000 people have been affected, the Disaster Management Center said on Tuesday. According to official figures, the highest number of deaths was reported from Kigal in west-central Sri Lanka within the past 24 hours as strong winds and heavy rain swept across the country. The Meteorology Department issued a red alert for several areas as more rain and winds are expected in the next few days. A landslide warning was also issued for 10 districts, including the capital, Colombo. And now, for more details on the rollout of the COP26 meeting, we go to the United Kingdom with our collaborators Ian Bruce and Sabrina Fernandez.
Hello and welcome to the COP26 Coalition in Glasgow. I'm Sabrina Fernandez.
And I'm Ian Bruce, and this is Inside Outside, your daily look at what's going on inside the COP26 and outside in the struggle for climate justice. After the extraordinary protests on Friday and Saturday, the People's Summit for Climate Justice began on Sunday. Monday saw sessions on the feminist path to climate justice, a trade union forum on ecological transition, the global Green New Deal, as well as a workshop on radical mycology, and dozens more.
Protests also continued outside the COP26 Climate Summit. This was Nothing About Us Without Us, denouncing how much of the world has been excluded from these talks. And this was one of the protests inside the Blue Zone, pointing out how military spending drives climate change, but it's left out of countries' commitments to cut carbon. Monday was the summit's official day on adaptation and loss and damage. To highlight the challenges, the UNFCCC released some new research that points to the size of the problem. It shows that if global warming is allowed to reach 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, that will mean 800 million more city dwellers around the world facing lack of water, 100 million more farmers facing drought, and 400 million people subject to severe flooding along coastlines and rivers.
But the truth is, the negotiations inside the COP have reached an impasse, and that's precisely because the rich countries don't want to pay more for the impact of the climate change they have mostly caused.
Ian went to find out more about what exactly these issues are.
We're in the Blue Zone on Monday at the beginning of the second week of this COP26, and it's not really clear where the negotiations and the talks inside have got to. To try and understand this a little bit better, I'm going to talk to Nathan Thankey of Demand Climate Justice. Nathan, what exactly is going on?
So we just wrapped up an informal stock-taking plenary, which is just jargon for a session where the president of the COP, Alok Sharma, asked the chairs of the two subsidiary bodies that have been meeting all of last week to wrap up what they've been doing and for him to then present his vision for a process going forward. In that plenary, we heard very, very, very frustrated developing countries, all of the developing countries and all of their blocs expressing a deep-seated frustration with how talks are going at the technical level. Their main frustrations revolve around finance issues, where they say that developed countries are unwilling to actually be serious about their commitments on finance, to acknowledge their failure to deliver previous commitments, and are very reluctant and are derailing talks to set new commitments on finance that would really help developing countries in their transitions. They're also deeply frustrated in particular about the lack of seriousness with regards to loss and damage to help developing countries deal with the impacts. We've heard a lot of rhetoric even about this. News stories about the Scottish government giving £1 million dominated the cycle. But what we're seeing in the talks themselves is a sheer single-minded reluctance and unwillingness to negotiate on the issue of loss and damage, and in particular the issue of loss and damage finance. They're okay to have a workshop here and a workshop there. They're okay to have a website or some kind of institutional arrangement which they might fund a little bit, but on the real issue of even hearing about the needs that developing countries have as a result of climate breakdown, the developed countries are not interested at all.
So just to be clear, today is meant to be Adaptation and Loss and Damage Day, and what the developing countries want is a separate stream of finance for the damage already done from whatever money might or might not be available for adapting to damage in the future.
Absolutely. Developing countries are insistent that they are owed finance not just for mitigation, which is to reduce their emissions, and for adapting to climate change, but beyond that, in addition to that, they need finance to deal with the impacts that can't be adapted to. And that's what their key ask has been for many, many years. And that's what they are not seeing any willingness from their developed country partners to engage on at all.
Thank you very much indeed. So, as you can see, in spite of the rhetoric, loss and damage and adaptation remain two extremely controversial issues here in the COP26, and ones over which the least developed countries are not in agreement with what's being on offer.
The People's Summit is not only an alternative to the official space inside the COP, it's also an opportunity to help to build movements around different countries and to link them together.
Water, energy, land.
That was the message that Andrés Tapia, who works with the indigenous movement in Ecuador, brought to one of these sessions.
We have many spaces of articulation in different places. In Ecuador, after the uprising and the mobilization of October 2019, the Parliament of the Peoples also rose. I think it is an instance that brings together 182 social organizations in the country, and it is an instance. We have here the coalition, which is an articulation of civil society that also faces the same challenge. The uprisings and mobilizations in Chile and Colombia have generated similar processes. So the coalition can fulfill this function of articulating all the needs, demands, commitments, agreements, realities and proposals that arise here within the framework of COP26, and precisely be the channel and the bridge that communicates with other articulations that are emerging in different places, not only in Europe and Latin America, but also in North America, Asia, Africa and Oceania. We need to join these type of coalitions in a global common platform that allows us to have a program that marks the route of what should be the work of the social movements.
The People's Summit continues until the 10th of November, while inside the Blue Zone, the so-called high-level negotiations will take place, with more leaders expected to announce their commitments.
That's all for today's Inside Outside. Thank you for joining us.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Ian and Sabrina, for this report. And now we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Niger, 26 children died in a blast on Monday after their straw and wood classrooms caught fire. The tragedy also resulted in 13 injured infants, all of them who went to a school in the Maradi region, south of the country. 3 days of mourning since Tuesday were issued for the Maradi region. A similar incident occurred in the district of Niamey in April, resulting in 20 children dead. Niger's government lamented the tragedy and stated that straw and wood classrooms will be banned in the country. A difficult task, given that straw and wood sheds have served in the making of buildings as a way to fix shortages of education centers.
Children in the middle of the class were the most affected. They were screaming. The parents who had come to pick up their children brought help. But the problem was the children who were sitting at the back of the classroom and who were seriously burned. There was a child who clung to me shouting, "It's so hot." I managed to pour sand to extinguish the flames to cut his shirt.
We saw the flames inside the school. They were only teachers. They did their best to fight the fire. We are patrons of the school. It is our children who were studying there. So we jumped over the wall of the school with cans and buckets filled with water that we threw on the flames. We were able to save the children who were still alive when we took them to the hospital.
Now we address other topics. The United Kingdom has said that it will recognize COVID-19 vaccines on the World Health Organization's emergency use listing later this month, adding China's Sinovac and Sinopharm and India's Covaxin to the country's approved list of vaccines for inbound travelers. The changes, which come into force from November 22nd, will benefit fully vaccinated people from countries including the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, and India. According to the Department for Transport, travel rules are being further simplified as all people under the age of 18 will be treated as fully vaccinated at the border and will not be required to take a pre-departure test, day 8 test, or self-isolate upon arrival. They will only be required to take one post-arrival test and a confirmatory free PCR test if they test positive. In China, scientists report on the most recent results and progress in drugs to counter COVID-19. The National Biotechnology Group of China, a subsidiary company of Sinopharm, published the progress in studies that has been developing in the search for a COVID-19 cure. It is a wide-spectrum antiviral whose principle is the plasma of recovered patients and vaccinated people. This immunoglobulin is in the clinical trial phase and aimed at patients with mild to moderate symptoms, was approved by China by the health, medicine, and food instances. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurienglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm your host, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.